What's up, everyone? My name is Uncle Jay. Thanks for checking out another vlog. Just wrapped up my yoga session, day 7 of the quarantine. I've done 7 straight days of yoga. I feel great, trying to get my exercise on, trying to stay sane throughout all of this. But I'm doing all right. How are you doing, though? Make sure that you're doing something. Something. Please make sure you're doing something. I think that it's a good thing that the Olympics were postponed and not canceled. The Olympics have only been canceled during the two world wars. So the fact that it's going to take place next year is a good sign that people think that we're actually going to get rid of this virus at some point, hopefully in a timely fashion. I do strongly believe that the World Series of Poker will just be canceled. Perhaps that they'll host the main event somehow at some point, but the rest of the 70 tournaments or so are going to be. That's just my opinion. The UK has issued a 3-week mandatory quarantine that the police are going to enforce. And I think that America is not too far behind from that. People in the UK can only leave to get food for medical reasons, if you really have to go to work, and for one form of exercise per day, which Americans don't do. So, I feel like we're getting there because people aren't listening to the mandated quarantine, and it's only going to get worse. It just takes a quick Google search to see exponential growth, which is what is happening with this coronavirus. So it's pretty scary as to what's going on. So as a result, we are staying home. I am on my property. I am not leaving unless I need to. Now let's talk about some poker hands. This is going to take place from a tournament that I played yesterday, a small stakes poker tournament. It was a rebuy add-on deep stack. It was $1,000 guaranteed pot, and I think there was ended up being like 3,200, so it crushed the guarantee. Let's get to it. This first hand up for discussion, we pick up King Queen suited in the cutoff. We're facing an early position min raise and a caller. Then there was a 3-bet min raise. I think that these sizings are way too small, especially given the fact that we are in the very first level of the tournament and we're playing about 200 big blinds deep. And there are a handful of players that actually bought in for 400 big blinds. So I think that a min raise here and a min 3-bet has pretty much zero fold equity, and you want to have at least some. So we just decide to make the call here instead of 4-betting because King Queen suited has really good post-flop playability. So we go 4 ways to the flop and we see 5-4 deuce with 2 hearts and 1 club. It checks around to us, and I don't think that we need to be betting here because a lot of cards on the turn are going to be pretty good for us. Obviously, any king or any queen are going to give us a made hand, and any club on the turn can enable us to barrel the turn and most likely fire the river. So we decide to check, and the turn is an offsuit queen, and the initial raiser leads out for half pot, and he gets 1 caller. I don't think there's any merit in raising here because we have to think about what hands are going to call us. Will Queen Jack, Queen 10, Queen 9 ever call a raise here? And the answer is probably not. So for that reason, I think that calling is perfectly fine. And we see a river of an offsuit 6. The initial aggressor decides to check, and the second villain bets half pot. And again, I just think we need to be calling here for the same reason that we call on the turn and not raise, because we have to think about what hands are going to call us. And the answer is only better hands. So we decide to make the call and we take down a decent pot. The next hand we're going to look at, we pick up pocket aces in middle position. We're facing an under the gun limper, and we make it 5 times the big blind. I think that this is pretty standard here. Maybe you can go up to 110, 120, but I wouldn't really go much higher than that. We end up getting 3 callers, so we go 4 ways to the flop, and we see 9-3-3 rainbow. And I do think that we need to be betting here, even though this board is extremely difficult for our opponents to connect with, given that we are multi-way to a flop. It's easy for any of our opponents to have something. So I think that we need to be betting just a small amount here, and I decided to bet 150 into the 400 pot. And we end up getting one caller, the person who was in the big blind. And the turn is an ace, giving us our full house. So this is obviously a great card for us. And to my surprise, the big blind leads out for a half pot. So this tells me that he has either the other ace in the deck, or perhaps a 3 or a flush draw, maybe even a 9. He can have all that kind of stuff in his range. So when he bets half pot, I pretty much have the nuts here, and I want to figure out how I'm going to get all the money into the pot. So if I were to just make the call, the pot would go up to 1700, and my opponent would have about 2900 behind, making it difficult for us to get all the money in on the river. So I decide to min re-raise, because if my opponent were to call that, then it would set up a pot size bet on the river, making it an easier all-in for us to get all the chips in. So we do click it back, and to my surprise, he just folds, and I thought this was really weird. I don't know what you're leading out with on the turn and then folding to a min raise, so it is what it is. So this next hand, we look down at pocket twos, and we are facing 3 limpers. I think we can either raise or bet here. You can go either way. I typically opt to limp behind with my smaller pairs, because when we do raise and get called, our smaller pairs are usually dominated by the flop unless we flop exactly our set. So I think that just limping and seeing what develops on the flop is our best option for the small pairs in the early stages of the tournament. So we go to the flop, and there's 6 ways to the flop, and we see king 4 deuce. So that's pretty awesome. And the big blind bets half pot, folds around to us, and I think that we do need to be raising here, seeing as how he likely has a king or a really good flush draw. We do want to be getting value from our flop set. So we make a raise of a little bit more than 3x on the flop, and he makes a huge 3-bet here. And I think that a set of 2s is just too good here. Like, there's no reason you're ever folding. He can obviously have king 4, king deuce, pocket kings, pocket 4s, maybe like an ace 5 of spades, but at this small stakes tournament, I don't think that players are making moves like that. So when he makes this huge 3-bet on the flop, I don't like just calling, because I don't want to see a spade on the turn. So I just decided to go ahead and get it all in here. And I think that this is the correct play. And my opponent does call off with king deuce. And I think that he could actually get away from this, because you have to think about what hands are beating you. And it's literally everything else except for 4 deuce. King deuce is pretty dominated. No one's got pocket aces here, because everyone just limped around unless someone was trying to get tricky. So I think that after my 4-bet shove all in on the flop, our opponent does need to be folding king deuce, but we are not complaining here. We will take the pot every single time. The next hand we're going to look at, we pick up pocket 10s in middle position. It folds around to us, and we make our standard 3x raise, and we end up getting called by just the big blind. So we go heads up to the flop, and we see 7-6-6 with 2 spades. I think that we do need to be betting after our opponent checks, as 7-6-6 with a flush draw is very connected board. And I only bet half pot, but I think that we can size up to a little bit more, to about 70% pot or so, because we do want to price in all of the spade draws, all of the 9-8s, and the 5-4 straight draws as well. And if our opponent does have a 7, then we want to price that in as well, as he's never folding. So we end up betting half pot anyway and get called. The turn is a seven, bringing in a backdoor flush draw. And this is a particularly bad card for us because the range I just outlined for you, the seven, obviously hits our opponent's range. So he checks to us, and I think that we just need to check behind because if we do bet, we have to think about, is an ace high really going to call us here? Maybe some overpairs will call, but it is a very scary board, and our tens could essentially be turned into a bluff catcher. So we end up checking back, and the river comes in offsuit 3, and our opponent over bets the pot. He bets over 1,000 into the 700 pot. And I think that this is a fold. I don't know how often our opponent is betting here. During this stage of the tournament, I don't know how much pot stealing is really going on. So I think that we do just have to make a snug fold here. Let me know what you think about this in the comments, but I think that this is the right play. For the next hand, we're going to look at Jack 9 suited on the button. Gets folded around to us, and we make our standard 3x raise and get called by the villain in the big blind. The flop comes ace 10 8 with 2 clubs, giving us an open-ended straight draw. Villain checks to us, and I think that we do need to be betting here. In general, we do want to be betting our draws and our made hands, and this is a pretty good draw, even though there are 2 clubs out there blocking us from having the nuts. I still think that with just a jack high and an open-ended straight draw, we do need to be betting. We don't need to be betting that much in this scenario, as ace 8-10 is a pretty easy board for our opponent to connect with. He can have a lot of big cards, any straight draw, any 10 or any 8. The ace hits our range more than his. So I think for all these reasons that we just need to be betting a little bit less than half pot. And just realize when you do make this bet that you're going to be getting called a large majority of the time. So just be prepared to barrel on later streets if the cards don't run out too bad for us. So we do make the bet of a little bit less than half pot, and our opponent calls. The turn comes in offsuit 6, and our opponent checks again. This card doesn't change too much of anything, and I think that we still need to continue barreling. And again, we do need to be betting small here because we do expect our opponent to be calling with a lot of 10s and 8s and flush draws and straight draws and perhaps king queen and king jack and queen jack as well. So we bet small again, and our opponent calls. And the river is an offsuit ace, pairing the board, and our opponent checks again. And this ace really does hit our range more than our opponent's range. And now we want to figure out a sizing that's going to get better hands to fold. So our opponent most likely has a busted draw or a middle pair. So we need to think about what type of bet is going to get these middle pairs to fold. And I think that betting about 70 to 75% pot is plenty because then we put our opponent in a tough spot to make a hero call. And at this stage of the tournament, there's no reason for anyone to be making hero calls unless I have been getting completely out of line for the last hour, which has not been the case. So we end up getting away with a good bluff here. The next hand we're going to look at, we pick up pocket 10s in late position. We're facing an under the gun limper, and the person in middle position min raises it, and he's playing about 60 big blinds deep. I don't think that this is a good raise because you want to have some sort of fold equity when you do raise. So when this villain makes it 400, the person that limped in for 200 is literally never folding, and you want your raises to create some fold sometimes. So if I were in the villain's shoes, I would be betting at least 600 here. Some people opt for like 650, but the min raise facing one limper is just an entirely too small of a bet in general. So when it comes around to us with pocket tens, after facing a weak raise, I do see a 3-bet in order here. So I go ahead and make it 1300 after the villain raised it to 400. And I think that this is pretty standard. I don't think we need to go much smaller than this. 1200 would be the minimum. And as far as going more than 1300, I wouldn't go higher than, let's say, 1500. So after our raise, the initial limper does call my raise, which isn't too surprising, but then the villain who raised 400 ends up shoving all in. And I think that we have a clear fold here, because what are we really beating? Is our opponent really shoving with pocket nines, pocket eights, pocket sevens? Probably not. Maybe ace king or ace queen suited, but if we're dominated by literally everything else, I think that pocket tens is going to be a fold here. A little frustrating, but make sure you don't just become a calling station because you have a good starting hand, and when faced with aggression, it's good to get out of the way. For the final hand of the vlog, we pick up pocket queens in late position. We're facing a raise of about 2.7x. And I think that we definitely have a 3-bet in order here. The question just is how much. Notice that we're playing about 57 big blinds deep to start the hand. So after our 3-bet, we shouldn't have too much difficulty getting all the money in by the river if that's indeed what we want to do. So the question is, how much do we 3-bet? And we want to be aware of how much money is in the pot. So the way we calculate the size of the pot, we take our opponent's last bet and we multiply it by 3 and add any additional dead money that's in the pot. So 742 chips, we multiply that by 3. And we add 280 from the big blind, we add 140 from the small blind, and we add 225 as far as the antes go, and that gives us 2871. And I decide to raise to 1980, and that's about 69% pot. And I think that's a pretty good raise. I don't think we need to be going up much more than that, because once we get into the 2400 range, our opponents are going to be folding out hands like pocket eights, pocket sevens, pocket sixes, ace jack suited, and obviously our pocket queens dominates those hands. So we make the raise and our opponent calls, and we see 6-4 deuce with 2 clubs on the flop, and our opponent checks to us. And again, I don't think that we need to be betting that much here, less than half pot for sure, as this is an extremely difficult board for our opponent's range to be connecting with, given that he opened as the initial raiser and called a 3-bet. He shouldn't have that many low cards in his range. So we make a continuation bet of a little bit less than half pot, and we get raised. So given our opponent's raise here, what is his range? He could have a lot of ace-king suited. He could have a lot of sets. I don't think he has any straights, because 5-3 isn't a hand you would open with. Not many 2 pairs either. So either big cards or a really monster flush draw. So our queens up against that range, I think, is generally okay. I think this is too good of a hand to fold, especially given the fact that we have the queen of clubs as a redraw. So we go ahead and make the call, and the turn is the 3 of clubs, completing an obvious straight and the obvious flush. And our opponent puts us all in, and this ends up being about half the size of the pot for us as far as our chip stack goes. And I'm not sure what to do here. I don't know. I think that given us outlining our opponent's range, he could have a lot of flushes and a lot of sets. This might be a snug fold, because if we do hit our club on the river, how often Is our queen of clubs good? We could be up against pocket kings, pocket aces, ace king of clubs, and we're just already dead. So we decided in the moment to make the call. But I'm not sure if this is a snug fold or not. But regardless, it was a fun run and a fun tournament. We did not place, but I feel like our poker play was very good. And that's all we can really do is try to make the best possible decisions that we can. So thanks for checking out today's video. If you liked what you saw, please click the thumbs up button. If there's anything that you want to see, let me know in the comments below. And we'll see you soon.